Well, welcome everyone. This is David Morgan of themorganreport.com, and today, the word special is overused, but this is special, very special, because it revolves around the most important thing about my life's work, and that is freedom. Artur Pawlowski is with me today. He is a pastor in, I believe it's Toronto, Canada, and I'm just going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself, and we're going to have a conversation that hopefully will enlighten people that know him and people that don't, so that we can work together to overcome the tyranny we're facing on the planet right now. Art, thanks for coming and giving me your time. Please give some background to my viewers.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm actually from Calgary, Alberta. Okay. So on the other side of our amazing country, as you can tell, I grew up behind the Iron Curtain under the boots of the Soviets in Poland. So I'm a Polish immigrant. I grew up in a very peculiar country. If you know your history, you know that Poland has been repeatedly attacked by the wannabe tyrants. Throughout the Polish history, we had to stand up and fight for what rightfully was ours. And the recent history, when the Nazis attacked Poland in 1939, and then we were subjected to the cruelty of the tyrants in black boots, if you will, where over 11 million Polish people were slaughtered. And then when the whole world was celebrating liberation and freedom, Poland was taken, kidnapped, if you will, subdued by the Soviets. And that's where I grew up. I grew up under that regime, that totalitarian dictatorship. So what happened was I grew up in a city that had a concentration camp. I remember as kids we were playing in the bunkers of the SS. And of course, being a Polish kid, I always heard the stories from my grandparents, stories from the older generation about the atrocities that the Nazis did. And then firsthand, I was witnessing the atrocities of communism and socialism. And the only way I can describe it to you is hell on earth. You have no rights whatsoever. It's 50,000 communists that were ruling 36 million Polish people with the iron fist, and they had everything. The rest of the people had nothing. The law for them was totally different than the law for the slaves. And that's exactly what I see as a repetition of history in front of our very eyes as well. I was kind of wondering why God wanted to use a man like me, especially you with my broken English and accent and coming from behind the Iron Curtain and just wanted to live a life of freedom and prosperity. I mean, is that not what all of us want? We just want to be left alone, work hard, and leave a legacy, inheritance, if you will, for the next generations. So why me? Why me? Well, I think there are different factors. One, I know history. I love history. I teach history. Besides theology, I teach history. I absolutely love it. You can learn so much from the mistakes of others or successes of the past generations, but also because I saw the atrocities of communism, but I also saw the remedy, if you will, the solidarity movement in the 80s under Lech Wałęsa. I witnessed that with my own eyes. I saw the power of the millions over the few, when the millions finally had enough, when the millions decided for the sake of our children, we're not going to give you even an inch, and they took it to the streets under the umbrella of solidarity with each other and the general strikes, and they won their freedom. I saw that with my own eyes. So when mafia took over Poland, my parents decided that it's time for us to go and find peace in another place. And we emigrated to Greece, and we had very successful businesses there. And then Canadian Embassy invited us to come for an interview. I will never forget the conversation with the officer there when he said to us, come to Canada, sell everything you have, sell your businesses. We had cars. We had a great, our El Dorado was in Greece, in that beautiful country. And he said, sell everything you have, come to Canada. Canada is the freest country on earth. In Canada, no one will ever persecute you for your faith. And so we decided to sell everything, even though we had a very successful businesses and we were doing really well. What was missing was freedom. We wanted to do everything legally with papers. We wanted to be citizens, and that was very difficult in Greece. So when Canada said, come to Canada, we'll make you citizens, that was very appealing to us, and we did. In 1995, we emigrated to Calgary, Alberta, and we started all over, fresh again. We didn't speak English. We didn't have anything, and we started fresh. And later on, my wife joined me, and the shocker of our lives was when we decided not to just live for ourselves, but we decided to take care of the homeless people. And I don't know how much you're familiar with the business of homelessness, but it's a very lucrative multi-billion-dollar business, at least here in Canada. I didn't know. I was very naive. I was a rookie, if you will. I was just a fresh believer. I just didn't want to live for myself. We had a very good business. I was making lots of money, and I just wanted to give a little bit back. And when God healed my son, and if you're interested in why Artur Pawlowski is doing what I'm doing, you can watch it. It's a free documentary called Street Advocate. My son was born with a heart on opposite side, smashed lungs, and a hole in his muscle, and the doctor said all the bowels smashed his upper chest, and he's not going to survive. He's not going to live. I think that moment in my life made me the man I am right now, because at that moment I decided that I don't want to live for myself anymore. I want to do something for others as well. And we started a ministry that now is called a street church. And I've started about 40 ministries like this in different countries. And we've traveled around the world and did missions in Africa, in Caribbean, Europe, United States as well. So the shocker came when the Canadian government announced to us, when we were very successful in what we were doing. I'll just give you an idea. Within 3 months, we took 600 people off the streets, not taxpayers' money, just volunteers. The shocker came when the government declared that giving free goods and services is now illegal in Canada. So as a human, you're not allowed, without a special permit from the mayor, you're not allowed to save another life. You're not permitted to do that. You must receive a special permission from the government. Also, I got tickets for a distribution of printed material. I was also told that Bibles, gospel tracts, are illegal at this moment. You're not allowed to distribute them. And the signage, I was told that my signage is offensive. It said on a banner, Jesus loves you. Jesus is king, and they said that name offends people, therefore is illegal. I got tens of thousands of dollars worth of tickets. So anyway, that triggered a fight for me from 2005. In 2006, I became the first Canadian to be arrested for publicly reading Bible without amplification. I faced a year of imprisonment for that horrible crime. $120,000 later, I was vindicated, but I tasted the level of corruption in this country, and I decided to fight them. I decided to expose them. I don't know if you are familiar with the homeless business, but the shelters are getting money, taxpayers' money per head. It's like cattle. The more cattle, the more money. The more people under your umbrella, the more millions upon millions of dollars is given to you. So a person like me that was becoming very successful, with 250 volunteers in 7 locations, I became a danger to their establishment. I became a danger to their business. So shelters, a drop-in center, a Master Seed, which was supposed to be a Christian organization, and the mayor of the city of Calgary took me to court trying to prevent me from taking people off the streets. I mean, total insanity. I fought them for 10 years. 300 citations, over 100 court cases, and at that time it was 11 arrests. And then finally I win. Of course, they destroyed me financially, because you got to remember that the process is the punishment. You can win your case, but there is no vindication in the end, except you're not in prison. There is no going after them and suing. The process of being arrested and going to the courts and appealing the cases and being subjected to their cruelty, to their system that has nothing to do with justice, is the punishment itself. So 2015, I win my final court of appeal and they leave me be for a few years, and then the big lie shows up. I call it the big lie of 2020. And I was told that I have to stop feeding the poor because we're in the middle of this great crisis. And I just said, you people do not make any sense. When you're going to shut down the shelters, when you're going to shut down the soup kitchens, and that's what I do, the big portion of our ministry, streetchurch.ca is feeding the poor. So that's what we do. That's the main focus. That's where the truckloads of food are going in and going out to take care of the most vulnerable in our society. And I said, when you're going to shut down your shelters and shut down the soup kitchens, what do you think is going to happen to 15 to 20,000 different individuals roaming the streets of our cities? Because I know, I work with them since 1999. They're going to turn into crime. They're going to whack your grandma's head. They're going to break into your car, into your garage, into your house, into a grocery store. They're going to get the necessities of life this way or that way. But you know what was the shocker? No one cared about what I had to say. I appealed it to the mayor, I appealed it to the ministers, I appealed it to the premier of Alberta. Premier is like your governor. No one even replied to me. No one cared about human beings. At that moment, my friend, I knew this has nothing to do with keeping people safe or saving lives. Actually, quite opposite. At that moment, I knew they're to get us. They are to destroy lives. And of course, 3 years later, I was proven right. But the wrath of the government came heavily. I became the first Canadian to get a COVID ticket. I was surrounded by 12 officers. My parishioner was pushed, assaulted by the police. I was threatened with arrest and $1 million award of ticket. So I became the first recipient of the ticket. They did a big sting out of it. It was all over the news. Even the chief of police spoke how horrible and evil of a man I am, endangering people's lives. So fast forward, it's a complicated story, but I'm doing my best to narrate people about what happened and why it's important for the people's eyes to be open and to understand what we're facing. And if people like me will not be able to awaken you, people that lived through this, then I don't know what else will shake you out of your, sleep. So the culmination of 2020 happened when Canadian government declared that they're canceling. That's what they said. We have to cancel Christmas. I don't know if you remember that time. They're canceling Christmas. You're not allowed to sing. You're not allowed to have dinners. You cannot have your brother for coffee. You cannot congregate. I mean, the whole thing was being shut down. You can't even drive in your own car with another human being, because then the wrath of the government is going to hunt you down. And we were labeled lawbreakers, troublemakers, murderers, endangering people's lives. And what I did, because of course at that time I knew that they are lying to the public. So what I did, I invited my family and my friends to the biggest Christmas dinner I could fit in my home. I took pictures and I sent it to the devils. And I said, you devils, you cannot cancel Christmas. I'm canceling you. And also I went on television and I said to the people that I'm going to organize the biggest Christmas celebration in the land. And so that's what I did. We had AAA steaks. We had hundreds of gifts for the homeless people. We had thousands showing up. We also had over 100 police officers. That's, by the way, my record. Over 100 police officers, anti-terrorists, 20 cops on bicycle, 52 police cars, chief of police, and a special unit from the SWAT team recording every word we are saying and taking pictures and videos. I also did, according to them, the unthinkable. At that time, you were not allowed to have Lord's Supper. You were not allowed to sing. I was told that singing is the most dangerous thing in the land. If I dared to sing, the whole city would collapse and everyone would die. So what I did, I mean, I'm a Polish immigrant, so I just don't do what the Nazis and the communists are telling me to do. So I hired carolers, and we were singing, caroling Christmas songs. The government freaked out and they came bearing gifts. It was Christmas after all. So I ended up with 15 COVID tickets. Chief of police was there. It was a big gong show. The chief of police said that they're going to monitor driveways to see if there are extra cars. You're not allowed to have a family member, no family dinners, a total craziness. So I ended up with 15 COVID tickets. It took me 2 years to fight them. And then 2021 came. They started to attack me in the building. So here is street church. We feed the people 3 times a week on the streets of Calgary. And then I also have a church building where I teach theology and, sermons and history. So they started to show up in a church building. And first they prohibited people from driving to a driveway in front of the church. So they blocked the driveway. Then they brought telescopic cameras and started to take pictures of children and women. And if you know anything about Russians, if you know anything about Gestapo, those were the typical tactics of those totalitarian regimes before. If we can get a man, we will use his family. We will go after his wife. We will go after his children. There was this famous saying, you know what we can do to your 13-year-old daughter? Well, imagine, we know where your wife goes to work. So those were the tactics that the Canadian government started to use on the Christians. And then, of course, April came. And as you remember, they invaded against the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 176, 1, 2, and 3. They entered the church sanctuary against the law. And they were demanding to inspect our facility during our worship session. So we were about to start. I was waiting for the people. There was a prayer going on, and the worshipers were starting, and they just walked in, masked bandits. So I had only one thing for them: get out. And it took me over 30 times to tell them to get out. So eventually they leave, but they come back with a vengeance. They found crooked judges. The first one was David Gates of Alberta, and I don't know if he is related to your devil, Bill Gates, but David Gates of Alberta gave them the power to invade our church anytime they want with whomever they wish. So they showed up with SWAT team, anti-terrorists. I kicked them again. They showed up again, kicked them again. And then they found another crooked judge, John Rook, the crook, as I call him now. He gave them the power to enslave 4.5 million Albertans. He subjected the entire province to his ruling that if anyone that dares to oppose a health inspector can be found in contempt. So the SWAT team shows up with that paper, drop it on the ground, and later on, when they realize it's going to be a bloodbath, because dragging a preacher from a pulpit is not going to turn well. They waited for the people to go home, and they arrested me and my brother David in the middle of the highway on our knees. We spent 3 days and 2 nights on concrete, completely illegal. And then we met the next crooked judge, Adam Germain of Alberta. Well, this man started the proceedings with quoting CNN and CBC, telling we're in the middle of the pandemic and blah, blah, blah. And I turned to my brother David, he's not the judge. This is not the judge. This is a political activist. Or a reporter for CNN. He's a bloody liar. And this whole thing is going to be a show trial. And I was right. This judge, Adam Germain, found us guilty. I went to United States. I shared my story. I traveled around your beautiful nation. I attended conferences, and I shared my story, warning Americans about what's coming to them from the north, because Americans are really afraid of the southern border, but we are living behind the Iron Curtain in China right now, and you should pay attention, because your greatest enemy is in the north, not in the south right now. The Chinese already are being trained on Canadian soils training against Americans. They want to wipe you out. So anyway, going back to the story, when I came back, I was immediately arrested for embarrassing Canadian government in the United States. When I stepped out of a plane, I was arrested, charged criminally. I was charged with inciting people to come to church, officiating in illegal gathering, participating in illegal gathering. I was even criminally charged for baptizing my daughter in a river in a public park. So taken to prison again, released on bail, arrested again for attending a rally, released, arrested again with my brother David for daring to attend a protest outside of the Minister of Health house, arrested again, and then the track convoy came. The Judge Adam Germain found us guilty, and he gave us the famous or infamous compelled speech. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened. We have become the first Canadians ever to receive a court order that every time we talk to another human being, we must recite government-approved script about the COVID, about the vaccines, about the masks, 6 feet apart, all this garbage. Well, I said no. I said, I will never obey this order, so you want to arrest me, arrest me. My brother David said the same thing. Fast forward, we appealed the case, and we won a resounding victory. 3 judges ruled that everything that was done to us was illegal. So Canada was embarrassed on a global scale once again. And then the track convoy came. Of course, by that time, I was very well known. They called me Canada's pastor. They called me Freedom Pastor. And the truckers and the farmers invited me to organize a number of church services for them. So we did a couple of them in Calgary. We fed the truckers. We gave them a truckloads of food. Off they went to capital of Canada, Ottawa. We stayed behind. At that time, we had about 20,000 people showing up every week to our rallies. And then the truckers started to do it's the same thing in Milk River and Coutts. Coutts is point of entry between Montana and Alberta. They asked me to come and do a series of church services for them there. So I took my son Nathaniel and then a worshiper. We took food. We went to Milk River. I did a service there, Lord's Supper, singing hymns, and a sermon. And what I saw over there was absolutely the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in Canada. People loving each other, people coming from every background, every nation, every color. I mean, nothing was, everything was pushed aside. The number one thing was solidarity with each other, unity, freedom. And people were loving each other, hugging, crying, feeding, singing together. It was absolutely beautiful. So I did one there, RCMP, so like your FBI was there, and monitored me, took pictures, videotapes, and then they asked, I asked them if they would open the barricade so I can go with my team to Coutts. They did that. So I arrived in Coutts on private property in a Smuggler's Inn, a restaurant, and I did the same thing. I prayed for the people. We had Lord's Supper, the Holy Communion. We were singing hymns, a national anthem, and I delivered 19 minutes sermon to the hurting people. What did I say? I reminded Canadians about history, solidarity movement, Lech Wałęsa. I told them to hold the line. I told them to stand for God and state-given rights. And if they don't want to do it for themselves, I told them to do it for their children. I reminded them that the government, the wicked, corrupted traitors, do not have enough police officers. If 1 million truckers come, who can stop such an army of like-minded people? We can paralyze their system, civil rights movement style. No violence. 3 times during my sermon, I told them, no guns, no swords, no violence, peacefully. Well, it was well received. I went home. A few days later, I stepped out of my house. I was arrested, and I'm telling you, the whole street was blocked. It was like the greatest takedown of Al Capone of Canada, El Chapo of Calgary. RCMP was there, so like FBI, detectives, Calgary police uniformed, undercover, you name it, anti-terrorists, even a special team with video cameras came from SWAT I mean, it was unbelievable. I was interrogated by RCMP for hours, taken to prison, and then solitary confinement, 45 days, charged with unbelievable charges: terrorism, inciting mischief, breach of probation, and then they piled up a dozen of more crazy charges on me as well, criminal charges. So I was taken from my solitary cell, was placed in metal cages. I was taken from my solitary and taken to a concrete cells. I was denied access to my lawyers for 3 weeks, and my Bible was taken. My glasses were not given to me. Even my write-ups for the lawyer's eyes only was confiscated. And then eventually, I was kidnapped by the sheriffs and taken hundreds of miles away, shackled like an animal to a mag spot. Mag spot is for the most dangerous terrorists in the land. And believe it or not, I was the only inmate. I was considered so dangerous that they said I cannot even have a pen because I was writing down what was happening to me. And I was placed in a mag spot, a unit for hundreds of inmates, but no one was there. No one was allowed to be there because I was considered too dangerous. I was locked, watched by 3 guards in an empty unit for the most dangerous terrorists in the land. The freezing conditions, couldn't sleep, couldn't function, shivering. When I asked for a blanket, the guard laughed at me, said, "At least you have fresh air." And during that time, 5 different inmates from the previous prison already testified to my lawyers that the guards were giving them incentives to murder me in prison. All of that, the judge learned about what was happening to me, and the next day, it scared them. Remand centers in Canada are privately owned. So when the judge learned about what is happening to me, they moved me from a mag spot, and listen to this, they put me in a psych ward without the evaluation of the doctors, even without the knowledge of Alberta Health Services. I was placed in a cell with a schizophrenic that murdered his own brother, chopped him to pieces with a machete. So I think they were hoping that this kid would kill me while I was sleeping. Funny part of this story was that when I entered his cell, he had pens, he had pencils, you name it. So I told him I'm considered the most dangerous inmate in the land and I'm not allowed to have a pen. And he says, "Well, you can have mine." So that's how I got my pen back and I was able to keep writing my story. Eventually, I'm going to publish a book from everything, outlining everything that they did to me over there, stripped naked in front of men and women multiple times, just treated, threatened, metal cages, solitary, concrete, just total craziness. And again, remember, I have no record of violence. I've never been charged with any violent offense. I'm a pastor. All of this was done to me because I delivered a sermon to our hurting Canadians that were standing up for the God and state given rights peacefully. Everything we've done was peacefully, and yet they treated me like the most dangerous terrorist. So eventually I was released on bail. I had to give up lots of money to be released, and they're still holding my money, and I'm still on house arrest. I was placed on house arrest a year and a half ago. I'm still talking to you from a house arrest. I think I'm the first clergy in the history of Canada that this thing has been done to. I was accused of terrorism for my speech, and you can still watch it. It's still to this day on YouTube, believe it or not. Out of all the platforms, YouTube doesn't think that my speech was horrible, and is still there. I was ultimately accused by the Crown Prosecutor of causing Canadian economy over $400 million worth of damages for my speech. My speech was compared to Rwanda genocide. The Crown Prosecutor, Stephen Johnston is a Crown Prosecutor from a special Nazi unit, I call it, a special man specifically chosen to harass, intimidate, and attack anyone that dared to oppose the mandates and restrictions. Stephen Johnston is his name, from a special Crown unit, the Gestapo unit. He compared my speech to someone that was inciting murder. He said that Solidarity Movement of Poland was a violent coup. And guess what? The judge agreed with him. And a month later, I have become the first Canadian not only ever to be charged with inciting mischief, now I am a convicted criminal. I have been found guilty also on eco-terrorism. I'm the first ever in the history of Canada to be charged with this, and now I am the first one that has been found guilty. My sentencing was supposed to be happening on August the 9th, but it has been pushed to September the 18th. So anyway, I did my best to outline the most important parts of the story. Usually it takes me a few hours just to tell people what really happened. But Canada has never seen something like this before. It's lawlessness. There is no rule of justice anymore. There is no rule or order of any kind. Our God and state-given rights has been kicked out. The judges are corrupted, except few to the core. We don't have different parties anymore. We have different colors, but all of the politicians are chipping the same song, which is tyranny. We've lost checks and balances. We don't have independent mainstream. The federal government gave billions of dollars and bought the mainstream. So we have propaganda and propaganda only. There is no accountability. During the COVID time, the politicians were caught red-handed, breaking the rules and mandates, but nothing was done to them. One law for me, one law for thee. So that's pretty much what we are being subjected to in Canada. That's why I call Canada China now, and that's why I am saying we're truly living behind the Iron Curtain right now.
Wow. Well, first thing that comes to mind for me is what you said early on, and that was your background from Poland and watching what happened and seeing it happen in Canada. So what was the catalyst, if you can tell me, that brought the people into solidarity and said enough is enough? Because, you know, many of us, and now I'm not going to call this the truth movement, I'm going to call this the freedom movement. And they came together and they formed because, again, what people say is, well, there's so many of us and so few of them. You know, it's obviously arithmetic. I mean, we can overpower them. Yet people are timid and scared, and they see someone like you get arrested over and over, and very few people are willing to do what you've done. They're just too afraid. So was there a catalyst? Was it a human being that convinced enough people that they would stand together and say, you know, here we are, come and get us. We've had enough.
No, I'll tell you one word that did it: hardship. People of Poland were subjected to hardship for decades, and everyone was in pain, watching your children being in pain, watching your grandchildren, hopelessness, economy, total collapse of economy. Every day was a struggle just to get necessities of life. Shelves in Costco's, Safeways or Walmart's, whatever, were empty. So black market, you had to constantly chase after necessities of life, and you could be arrested at any moment for whatever. The reason was not needed. There was a famous saying by the police, which I see them doing right now. Give us a man, we'll find something on that man. A rule of law did not apply. It did not exist, even though Poland, I don't know if you're familiar with the history, was the second country on earth that implemented constitution. We were electing kings. But like I said to Americans when I was touring your beautiful country, and they would come to me and say, well, this will never happen here. We have a constitution, we have amendments, we got, the Declaration of Independence. And I look at them like, are you crazy? Are you that stupid? Tyrants don't care about your piece of paper. Dictators don't care about your Declaration of Independence. They don't care about your human rights. You must care about your piece of paper. You must rise up and stand up for the sake of your children. because those people will never stop. They're like cancer. Evil never stops. Evil has to be cut out. That's history. I mean, don't believe the words of a little pastor from the province of Alberta. That's history speaking, yelling, shouting. Tyrants never stop. Pharaohs never give up their, taken rights. They will keep taking until you have nothing. You must rise up and take what's rightfully yours, or else. So Polish people were subjected to this tyranny for decades, and finally the hardship was unbearable. And here's what I'm fearing. I'm fearing that it's still too good for Americans and it's still too good for Canadians. So what I predict is going to happen is they're going to lose their toys, they're going to lose their homes. Right now, economy in Canada is horrific. Canadians, I was told by a friend of mine, a banker, are about to lose their homes. 25% of Canadians are about to lose their properties because of the interest rates. Canadians have no savings. Canadians are hurting. Canada has the biggest private debt in all the G7 countries. The credit cards, line of credit, second mortgages are killing Canadians. So I would say within a year, the hardship is going to be really, really visible. And maybe perhaps then they will rise up and push this evil away. But hardship, difficulties, I have tendency for the people to come back to God and cry out to God. And difficulties make us all humble enough that we seek help. So that's what I'm predicting is going to happen. I think the fiat currency is collapsing. I think the economy is collapsing. I think they've printed so many trillions of dollars that this whole thing is crumbling. And we'll see. There are rumors that they're coming with 2.0 lie. So we'll see how that unfolds. But I think until people realize that, especially Canadians, because Americans get it a little bit better. You've dealt with tyrants before. You had your revolution. You had your uprising, and you had your civil rights. And Canadians have never been really subjected to something like this. The concept of a government is to get me, government is evil, government wants to kill my children is so foreign for the Canadian mind that they listen, they hear you, but they don't listen. They hear the words, but it's not entering their mind because they don't know history. You got to remember, Canadian kids are not being taught history. Canadian children are not being educated. They're being indoctrinated. Indoctrination is left and right everywhere, from the school, from the kindergarten to universities, to the mainstream propaganda. So for them, a man like me sounds crazy, especially when I use a very direct language like psychopaths, murderers, Nazis, Gestapo, communists. But I'm doing it intentionally because I'm trying to direct them into history. Well, okay, do you even know what is Gestapo, what that word means? People have no clue, no idea. Well, the Gestapo is simply a political police. That's what Gestapo means, a political police. Don't we have political policing right now in the United States, in UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada? I mean, I was arrested for a thought crime. I was not arrested for any violence. I was not arrested for any real crime. What is inciting mischief? What is mischief? Mischief is nothing. It's a made-up stuff by the government that has a 10 years attached to it. So I'm facing over 10 years of prison right now because I said words that the government didn't like. And what kind of words I said? I told the people to do it peacefully, to stand up peacefully against the modern day Caligulas or tyrants. My son is in hot waters as well because I am on house arrest. I was not allowed to go to European Parliament. So I sent my wife and my son to testify, and he did. And he had a standing ovation, and people were crying when he was delivering the message in our behalf, in the behalf of Canadians. Upon arrival in Montreal, he was arrested, detained with my wife, interrogated, searched, and we find out that there are warrants now for his arrest. You see, I said to the Canadians and I said to the Americans, be very careful. because people like me are a shield between you and the tyrants. If they will get rid of me, be sure of it, they will come for you as well. You're next in a line. They're working on me now. If you don't support a man like me, if you don't back me up, if you don't stand and allow me to raise enough funds to hire lawyers, we already spent over $1 million in legal fees. That's how they get you. The process is the punishment. Normal people are not able to stand against those tyrants. The tyrants have unlimited resources. They got lawyers, they got crown prosecutors, they got bought and paid for judges. They got the mainstream media propaganda, right? So, but we have to always remind ourselves that we have God. The moment God steps in, it's over for the villains. I don't care how big they are. I don't care what big of an army they possess. I don't care how many propaganda machinery they have at their disposal. The moment my God steps in, it's over for the giants, for the Goliaths of land. All of them combined together don't stand a chance when my God shows up. And that's why I said that to Americans, and I said that so many times to the Canadians. If you want your liberty, if you want your freedom, you must invite God of liberty back into your land. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is a liberty, the Bible says. If you want your freedom, and especially if you want your freedom for your children, you must invite God of freedom back into your land. When he shows up, it's over for the villains.
Let me interject there, if I might, Art. I hate to stop you, but a couple things. One was very enlightening, the answer to my question. So I'd like to just reframe it as what Gerald Celente says. When you've got nothing to lose, and you lose it. So the hardships were so bad that the people did come to solidarity because they had absolutely nothing to lose. The shelves were empty. You had to go to the black market to feed yourself. And that's basically said, look, we've got nothing. I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to stand together. Let's fight these SOBs, right? I want to move on to your next statement you just pretty much ended with. And that was, unless we support you, once you go down, then it's pretty much all over. At least that's my opinion. And history says that because they're taking you on. And you've won. You've lost and you've won. But you were vindicated there at one point where the judges came in and embarrassed Canada, which makes them even more angry and really want to go after you for anything that they really make up on a piece of paper. As you said, inciting mischief. What the heck does that even mean? And the last thing is God on our side. So I'm going to talk a little bit, but I don't know much about the parliamentary type of government. I know I watched Trudeau swear allegiance to the Queen, and what your political system looks like. I really haven't studied it that much. I've got a fair idea of the difference. But in our country, the government was formed by the people, for the people, under one reason, to protect our God-given rights. That's why we were founded and allowed government. And the government was installed to protect those rights. So when we founded the country, it was the same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. In fact, the highest place you could be in the United States was citizen, because everyone answered to you, your senator, your Congress critter, your municipal judge, or whatever. Of course, all that's been totally distorted and thrown out the window, as we all know. Although in this country, I would say, and it's my experience, that there's a little bit more pushback, as you indicated, that some of us, not very many of us, have stood up. We'll give you a real quick example. I want to turn it back over to you. But I was at the Red Pill Conference in Utah. One of the women there was one of the people that kind of facilitated putting the whole thing together. She was wearing a gun on her side. I didn't even notice it when I talked to her the first time. She came out from around the booth. I saw her a few hours later. I said, "Oh, I see you got an open carry." She says, "Oh, yeah. Do you have a minute?" Of course. She says, "Well, in the hotel across the street," and almost all of us stayed there. I came in, and the hotel manager walked up in kind of a panic and said, "You've got to take that off." And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, because it's hotel policy." And she said, "I don't care what your hotel policy is. The Constitution supersedes everything. It's the law of the land, and this is an open carry state. And I have the right, the God-given constitutionally secured right, to carry the sidearm." He goes, "Well, okay. Well, could you put your coat over it?" And she did. as kind of a courtesy to this idiot. But I thought, you know what? If we had more people in the United States that did that, we probably wouldn't be where we're at. And if we had more people like you in Canada, we probably wouldn't be where we're at. So I don't want to go on. I want to make it your interview, not mine. But I just wanted to point out. So could you enlighten us a little bit about the parliamentary process and what it's supposed to be and what it's morphed into? Or are you just subject to the Queen no matter what, and it can just make up this phony baloney stuff, and that's the way it was from the beginning?
Well, even being subjected to the Queen or the King right now wouldn't be that bad, because one of the titles of the Queen or the King now is the defender of faith. So in a way, in England, the law states that the king is a king and also is a head of the church. So not just the head of the state, but also the head of the church, and is a defender of faith. So if you really look at the law, let's just push everything aside, just look at the letter of the law. We are supposed to be protected under the king if it comes to our, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. But we're not, because the whole system is corrupted to the core. That's the problem. Our Constitution in Canada, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, starts in a preamble. Are you ready? Whereas Canada acknowledges the supremacy of God and the rule of law. So the letter, the law states there is a God and everything has to be subjected to his law. So what I mean by this is that his laws is first and then all the other laws follow. But when you kick God out of your country, when you become a hostile nation like Canada towards God and what's good and decent, then there are no standards. The rule of law is being thrown out the window, and that's what we're dealing with. It's kind of a mockery when you go to court and then there's a Bible and they are asking you to swear on the Bible. Like, why? You don't even believe in this book. It's a mockery. It's a show. It's pathetic, actually, if you think about it. I saw police officers swearing on the Bible, lying to their teeth, manufacturing documents. It means nothing to this society. Canada has become an evil country, evil to the core. We murder millions of children through abortion, the Holocaust. We march our pride naked in front of the children. The perversion, the sexual perversion is unbelievable. There is greed that I've never ever seen in my life in this country. People just want to become millionaires on top of other people's, bodies. There's no loyalty. There's no friendship. We have 55% divorce rate in the church. Look at the pastors. The past 3 years, we've seen it with our own eyes, how pathetic and hypocritical evil people those so-called clergymen have become. That they don't even believe in the Bible themselves. They're just hired guns, hired shepherds. They're not real shepherds. They had no problem to shut down the churches and segregate people, separate people. They obeyed the Pharaoh rather than obeying God. They even turned their facilities into a COVID clinics to inject people with experimental drugs. I mean, the church has fallen so low and they're still digging. It's not even funny. So how we have to fix this? A simple answer is we can't. We can't fix this. Only God can. So about half a year before the big lie happened, I had a vision, and I'll share it with you because I see it being unfolded in front of our very eyes to this day. So I saw a fence, and I saw lots of people sitting on the fence, and I could not see the end of the fence. And then I saw two powerful hands grabbing that fence, and I knew those hands are God's hands, very powerful, muscular. And he grabbed the fence, and he started to shake the fence. He kept shaking. And I saw people falling to the left and to the right, to the left and to the right, to the left and to the right. And he kept shaking violently that fence. And when he was done, and I'm telling you, it was a violent shaking. It was not a nice shaking, violent shaking. When he was done, no one was sitting on the fence, and then he spoke to me. And he said, when I'm done shaking, everyone will have to choose either me or the devil. Look at us today. Now you know who is who in the zoo. You know who is a sheep, who is goat, who is a wolf, who is real, who is fake, who is doing this just for money or prestige. All the fancy preachers, all the tele-evangelists, all the prophets and whatever apostles were more than happy to oblige the government by destroying human lives. Do you know that in Canada we have the biggest amount of suicides ever recorded in this country? Do you know that we have the biggest amount of fentanyl overdose ever seen in this country? Do you know that our percentage of people dying of unknown causes is 10% higher? It is crazy. 10 times, not 10%. 10 times higher. Sorry.
10 times. Okay.
10 times higher, not 10%. 10 times more people are dying in Canada than normally. Well, I look at the statistics, probably different cities will vary, but Lethbridge, if you Google it up, how many people died during the same time, before the big lie, and now it's 10 times more. It's a shocking thing, what they have done to us, what those clergymen allowed the government to do. Instead of protecting the people of God, they threw the people of God into the mouths of the wolves. So now they're coming after the children. I said that to Americans and I said that to the Canadians many times. When they're going to be done with the parents, they're going to start going after your children.
Right.
And they did not believe me. Now look at what is happening to my son Nathaniel. Nathaniel was delivering a speech, came back, was arrested, detained. Then he went to United States a few weeks ago, came back, warrant for his arrest again. And what he's charged with? He's charged with illegally attending a protest. Protests are protected within our Constitution as our God and state given right. It's one of the fundamentally guaranteed rights, and yet he's charged with illegally attending a protest and harassment. You know what he did to warrant that charge? He read the Bible. Because he read the Bible, that's considered a harassment right now. So he's charged with multiple counts. I had to hire a lawyer, $15,000 already spent just for my kid, for him to be able to defend himself against those evil, wicked, corrupted to the core representatives, or put it this way, servants of the people. The concept of them that were supposed to serve us is so foreign now that it's even hard to articulate. What they do is not serving us. What they do, they are enslaving us. And the concept that you will own nothing, you will be munching on the crickets and you will be happy is becoming a reality for many Canadians. We have over 3 million Canadians living in poverty, 1 million children living below levels of poverty. So it has begun. And I think the more people are going to suffer, the sooner they're going to realize that the villains never stop, that they need to be stopped. And I believe that's where people like me will be appreciated, because right now we're being taken for granted. Not many care what happens to us, but I think the time is coming when a man of integrity, when a man that speaks the truth will be appreciated again. So I have to wait for that time. I have to wait for the destruction of many lives. Perhaps then the remaining population will rise up and say, okay, well, now we're willing to bring God back to our nation. We're willing to listen to God's people. We just had an election in the province of Alberta. They just elected the same government that did this to them. I don't understand. I cannot even comprehend the idea in my head. Yeah. The very rapist that was raping you for 3 years, you just elected back so he can keep raping you. They did the same thing in Ontario. They just elected, I think it was last year, the same government that did this to them. It's beyond me. I don't get it. So
let me stop you there just for a moment. and not to be confrontational, but to empower more thinking. Lenin said, let them vote, because it doesn't matter if they vote. What matters is who counts the votes. So perhaps the people did reelect them, but the people that counted the vote made damn sure that they got the same tyrannical government they had initially. I'm just throwing that out as an idea. But I also like to say another thing and give it back to you. This is a quote from George Orwell, 1984. Speaking the truth in times of universal deceit is a revolutionary act. And that's exactly what you have suffered for this whole time, over and over again. I want to give it back, but I have one more question, and I really want to close out. I hope that you will come back, because I want to ponder this. I'm going to watch it at least once. Obviously, I'm going to put it out to all my social media and all the friends I have that I think have are influencers, and I know quite a few, and I think they will take up the torch and make sure it gets on their platforms as well. But what would you say is the most that we that are willing to sacrifice something? Just a little bit, not like our forefathers that gave up their honor and their fortunes and everything they had for liberty or freedom, but just those people that are willing, that shook off the fence and are willing to tell the truth. What would you say to them today to move forward, to get that solidarity that we all need? And I agree, we the people probably cannot do it. As you said, I hope I'm not misquoting you, and you can correct me, it's a God problem at this point. If we don't get God on our side and intervention there, we really don't stand a chance. Jefferson was very clear when he said, if the courts were corrupted, you're done. And the courts are corrupted. And as far as I see it, I agree with you. We are done. So back to you, please.
Yeah, this is a Red Sea moment. If you're familiar with the story, Israelites were being chased by evil, wicked people with vengeance and blood on their lips. On the left, they had mountains. On the right, they had mountains. And in the front was a sea. There was nowhere to go. And I think that God has led us thus far. He has led us to a Red Sea moment. I believe that if He wants us to survive this, He has to step in and help us. And we're asking Him to help us. God doesn't have to do anything, but He wants to do it. When you invite Him, He does show up. If you invite Him with a humble heart and clean hands and pure heart, and He will come to the rescue. And that's my prayer. God, come to the rescue. The giants are too big, too powerful, and we need your help. What I would say to the people that are willing to stand up, well, I would say thank you, because you're not doing this just for you. You're doing this for your children and their children. I said that many times when I was touring the United States. I said, whose land is this? You have to ask yourself this very simple question. The United States of America belongs to whom? It belongs to Biden's family, the crooked criminal enterprise, or belongs to Obama or Clinton's? Whose country is that? Because if it's theirs, I rest my case. Be a good slave and work for your modern day pharaohs. But if you say, no, this is my country, this is my land given to me by God Himself, this is my inheritance that I want to pass it to the next generation, then rise up and fight for what's rightfully yours. When I was in a plane coming to you, I asked God, what do you want me to tell Americans? What is the message to Americans? Because I can share my story, which of course I did. I can rally them. I can remind them about the heroes of old and, those founding fathers that signed the Declaration of Independence, and majority of them paid with their own lives. I can remind them their own history, because many Americans don't even know their own history. But what is the message from you to them? And here's what he said to me. He says, tell that great American eagle. He calls you great. It's quite interesting what I've heard. Tell that great American eagle that it's time for that eagle to rise up once again and start flapping its wings. That means God is saying to you, you're a power horse. You have the means, you have the opportunity to rise up once again. And that means you did it before, and it's time for you to do it once more. Do it again. And flapping wings, it means you need to act. You have to do something. You cannot just sit on the fence and watch the spectacle. You must jump and you must do something. So go and do something. Rally thousands of people. Go to your city halls. Run for office. But don't sit and watch, because the fence belongs to the devil. If you're sitting on the fence, know this: the fence belongs in hell. You must jump. Choose ye this day, the Bible calls us. Whom are you going to serve? Serve the truth. The truth, in the end of the day, is like a pillar. It stands on its own. It doesn't need to be supported by anything else. It's the lie that needs to be supported by more lies, misinformation, disinformation, manipulation. So thank you for standing up for the truth, and just go out there and bring that truth to others. Awaken the multitudes, because the moment the multitudes will be awakened, it's over for the wannabe pharaohs. And that's my prayer. My prayer is, God, open their eyes and open their ears so they can hear what you're telling people today, while there is still an opportunity. And I will close with this. Years ago, he spoke to me and he said, I came with mercy, love, and grace, and they've rejected me. Mm. But I will have my revival, he says, but they will come through the fire. When he said that to me, I knew immediately difficult times are coming. Through the fire, through the difficult times, people will rise up. And I believe we're going to see the greatest revival that this earth has ever seen. I believe that our time is coming. I believe that the remnant, the real church of Jesus Christ, is going to shine and is going to bring many into the kingdom of God. But first, the shaking, then the fire. All those things must happen in order for the people to realize that they need God. You have to know that you have a cancer in order for you to seek help. We have a cancer in the land, and the cancer needs to be cut out. So that's the cutting process.
How do we find out more about you? What's your YouTube channel that we can look at?
Well, the YouTube, my big channel was taken down because, of course, what I say, the YouTube fascists didn't like. I started a Rumble, so if people can come, so far so good. Pastor Artur Pawlowski on Rumble. I'm posting videos, so almost every day there's a new video, sermons as well. And then go to streetchurch.ca if you would like to support us, and we need that support. I have been shadow banned like I have never seen before, and the support is not coming as it used to, and the bills are piling up. So if you want to support, go to streetchurch.ca, street like a road, because we're on the streets feeding the poor, streetchurch.ca, and there are ways over there that you can support what we do. And now we are focusing on the youth. We want to activate the young people in Canada so they can carry the torch. Without the young people, we cannot do this. We need all generations coming in solidarity with each other under the umbrella of liberty to push those monsters, because don't kid yourself, they are monsters, to push them away from our beautiful nations.
Art, thank you for your time. Thank you for an incredible message. Thank you for your uncorruptible courage and your willingness to stand up in all conditions to bring the truth to the people. You are a hero of mine. May God support you all the way through. And I want to have you back. I've got to contemplate a bit of what we went over today, because I don't want to do a repeat, but I do want to think about it. And I'm sure there'll be things happening in our future that we need to talk about. So I'll stop there. You can say a final word if you'd like, and kind of run out of time.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on your show, and thank you for plowing. Thank you for your kindness, and I just want to end with this statement that I have been saying for the past few years. Our Father, our God, is a lion from the tribe of Judah. We are lions and lionesses, and lions do not bow before the hyenas. We eat them for breakfast. So go out there and keep eating them, keep standing. We have the saying in our church, winners never quit, quitters never win. So go out there and win. because our destiny is victory. We know how the story ends in the end. We win. In the end, the enemy just doesn't know it yet. So be blessed.
All right. Thank you very much.